Principled and of Integrating Presence. And today I'm joined once again by Wendy Nash. Wendy, what's going on?
G'day, I'm calling from Queensland. G'day, I've never actually opened with that
No, you
before.
haven't.
I'm here on Gubby Gubby country in Queensland, in Caboolture, and just give me 1 second because I just need to do all the audio here on YouTube because I like to check the comments to see what's coming in. So it's interesting to talk about today's episode. I'm really looking forward to it. You are in Korea at the moment.
Yes, South Korea. Yes. But
Yes.
usually just saying Korea too. Yeah, first time in Asia entirely. And this is one time when Wendy and I are actually only an hour apart in time zone. So that's pretty cool, I think. Getting ready to go on retreat here in a couple of days for a month-long silent offline retreat. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. I've been wanting to have that opportunity for quite some time, and now it's finally arrived. And I'm a little bit giddy in a sense. But Wendy talked about something before the show too about how that's that's only one little portion of formal practice, right? Our meditation practice extends, into our everyday lives, no matter what we're doing or not doing. So the formal practice is just one little section of it. And today, though, we're going to be the title we have here is Honor, Respect, Worthiness, and Belonging. And I've got the 27th session of our ongoing live series with Wendy Nash, exploring meditation practices both on and off the cushion. While the following topics resonate to varying degrees with all of us, we'd like to focus on the more traditionally masculine themes of honor and respect, as well as self-worth as associated with the feminine. We also plan to discuss the impulses behind craving, attachment, and clinging to the compulsion to convince others that I'm right, as well as themes of inclusion, exclusion, belonging, and the complex landscape of identity. And then, Wendy texted me this earlier and she says, I'm currently looking at self worth in terms of accepting self and other, the anatomy of the mind, the desire to persuade others that you're right, and the awful sorrow that arises when you know you've been excluded from the group and how that connects to self worth and identity. I like this term, anatomy of the mind. That's a very good way to put it. So, where should we start, Wendy?
Well, you're in Korea
Hmm.
and you've been moving around a lot. So, I guess maybe something about your how do you manage your practice? How do you remain respectful of other cultures, your own imprint on the world, particularly as an American traveling around? It's quite politically, there's a lot going on in that space. So, yeah, how are you using your practice to be respectful, mindful, heartfelt as a male American traveling all over the world?
Might I say even white male American, right?
Yeah, well, that's true.
So let's I was looking this up. Just it's good to have a dictionary definition, and honor and respect are very close to each other. So honor is high respect, great esteem, and it's also adherence to what is right, to a conventional standard of conduct. To regard with someone, to regard with great respect, to fulfill an obligation or keep an agreement. And respect means a feeling of deep admiration for someone or something elicited by their abilities, qualities, or achievements, and due regards for the feelings, wishes, rights, or traditions of others. And of course, a verb, admire someone or something deeply as a result of their abilities, qualities, or achievements. So, yeah, this is particularly challenging, I find. First off, how much do I honor and respect myself? Um, there were times in my life where I actually just absolutely loathed and hated and despised myself, and it's not helpful, but there's a way to do it, to be honest about it, and not lie to yourself either. So, yeah, there's so much to say. It's hard to know, but in the context of traveling here in Korea, I would say, you know, um, well, one thing that actually helps me and hinders me is not knowing language, right? Not knowing the language, but also being in an international community where it's really no problem because everybody speaks English. So it's a great learning opportunity. And I think a lot of it is just observing, and as an American, I, maybe I spiritual bypass or something like this, but I just tell people right away, and I haven't got asked that much, is that politics are an emotional con game. So I kind of opt out of all of that, and I don't really associate. Yes, I'm from America. Yes, I have that kind of imprint and baggage, a lot of baggage, and I just not interested in in the least bit of all the shenanigans going on in the political arena. I mean, my fiance is more interested in that type of thing than me. And so, regardless of what puppet is in there, the left or the right, everyone is, even them, are worthy of our honor and respect. And I know it's challenging sometimes, and that's a high thing to achieve. And I think some people may be more worthy of honor and respect than others. However, I've heard this saying that every time I honor another, I set a part of myself free. So it's a good practice to look at someone and find out, what can I honor here, what can I respect, when I have the mindfulness and resources to do so, because a lot of times it's not available. Another strategy I found to help with this is, okay, someone is just completely different from me. And I don't mean cultures here. I mean someone that can be very similar looking, similar backgrounds, and they just happen to be into something completely different than myself. And so in those cases, I can say, okay, I see and honor your Buddha nature, or your divinity, or whatever we want to use, but that's just not for me. And so I can still have a degree of honor and respect in some regards, that everybody is worthy of well-being, everyone's worthy of love, but uh, maybe they're engaging in something I just don't have any interest in. So I can still be honor honorable and respectful. But again, I fall way short of this a lot of times too. So yes, Wendy, how do you see this playing out, in your life, and maybe with the masculine in general? I think this is more of a challenge for men too. I don't know. I could be wrong about that, but we see a lot of disrespect in the world. We see people lacking honor, giving and receiving, and what's the importance of this even?
Well, you said, what does honor and respect mean? And
Mm,
I always like to go to the etymology of the word, so the
mm,
actual core, the root of the word in its origin, to understand the word, because it really makes a huge difference into what does the word actually mean. And so honor means, it comes from um, glory, renowned, and fame earned, actually. So that's the original. It comes from the Old French, Anglo French honor. So, and it's also to do with distinction, position, victory, and triumph. So it has something which says, I'm above you, I guess, in that way. So, but when I look at respect, that's a completely different etymology. So, re as in again, and spect as in look. So it's the act of looking back. So self-respect. You actually, self-respect is sort of a contradiction in, or what do you call it, a tautology, where you are saying the same thing twice,
yeah.
because what you're
Redundant.
thank you. A tautology, I think. A tautology
Tautology.
is where,
That's really
that's
good.
it.
Yeah.
So that's, you're basically saying you're looking back. So the meanings, feeling of esteem excited by actions or attributes of somebody or something, is from the 1850s
Mm,
onwards. But the beginning of it is actually about the relationship, how you look, the consideration.
mm,
So it's more, I'm, it's an act of me moving towards the person, and how do I see them, and considering that person. Whereas honor is more, I deserve honor, and I guess that's why you call it honor killings, or that whole death before dishonor. I saw somebody on his arm at the truck, the big truck hanging out the window is death before dishonor. I thought, oh, sounds a bit grim to me. So that's what I would say. So the question for me is, do I respect myself? In which case, or how do I see myself in order to understand how I respond to another person. So it's very dharmic in that response. And how do I honor people? And now I understand why I find the word honor very confusing, because I've always felt it's a bit weird and a bit, why would I be honor and obey? What is that? That sounds just some horrible, hideous, you know, way of behaving, treating people. You have to honor me because what? I've got some victory. I don't know. I just think,
No,
yeah,
and it's also that definition, at least in the kind of Anglo-American, perhaps, or Latinized, or whatever we want to say it. It has a lot to do with war, and that etymology that you read, it seems very warlike, gaining it through battle. But I mean, and to me, that's not very honorable to kill another, and to then see that as honorable. But it's a good point in the respect. Looking back, it also brings to mind like reflection, right, and also retrospection. So seeing things in retrospection, review maybe as well. So I just I kind of see a lot of the feminine way excelling way better than, not that we need to compare anything, but your beautiful definition of respect there, it hits the nail on the head. And it's a really good thing to these first impressions we see of people, right? And how that can inform our view and how we interact with them, even just from a first impression, and how much I'm going to kind of come with maybe judgments out of habits, and or even judge myself for having those judgments. So sometimes there's something to that, and sometimes it's not. I think sometimes it's just habit patterns. Um, yeah, the honor thing, I would say, yeah, I don't. It's like, well, is it earned? Do I does someone need to earn honor? And then if they do, how do they earn that? And I don't know if it's healthy to demand someone honor another, um, then again, how much value is there in respect? I think even dignity is a prerequisite before we even consider some of these things. Dignity, it's another one. But oh, Wendy, let's see. Your audio dropped out.
I'm here. It's my
There you
fault.
go. Got it. No, it's
Okay.
okay. Now I can hear you.
So we've got some people online.
Okay.
We have Ms. Reed, as usual. Thank you
Mm-hmm.
very much for joining us.
Welcome.
I hope you're on the treadmill today, as usual.
Mm-hmm.
Daveza asks, what is the topic? And honor and respect, and a whole lot of other things too. And Mr.
Yes.
Potato says, I'm gay. So I'm not sure
It's
how that works with
interesting.
honor and respect, but
And I
uh,
wonder if Mr. Potato is a troll or being sincere or what. But either way, hello and welcome. So yes,
yes.
uh, yes.
That's
Okay. The other one topic we were going to talk about is belonging to. Just so the other topic we have in there. So honor, respect, self worth, and belonging. Yes.
Yeah. So the other thing I wanted to say
Mhm.
is respect means to look again, not to look back. I got that one wrong because
Yes.
retrospect is to look back.
That's right. Yes. To respect means to look, and means again. Yes.
Yeah. So just to do that. So that's where I got.
Mm.
So I think it is, I think, just to respect, there is something about having a sense of dignity, I guess, in
Mm.
both of those. And how do you live with dignity? Um, yeah, how do you use the Dharma? How do you use or maybe use is not quite right, utilitarian? Um, yeah, what as dignity? Now, Daveza has asked, would you classify as pure enlightenment? What
Class.
would what would classify as pure enlightenment is the
Oh my
question.
goodness. Well,
It's
first off, what is tainted enlightenment? So pure enlightenment, that's an interesting way to put it, because I don't know. And I was just thinking about respect in regards to disrespect. I think we all know, maybe due to negativity bias, what disrespect is. But pure enlightenment, this is a classic question, so we can just set aside the pure maybe and just talk about it. Enlightenment, it's a really kind of a hot button topic, maybe a buzzword, a trigger word in spirituality too. I've got mixed feelings about the term, and but actually I'll throw it to Wendy here to start on that if she wants. um,
You know, I think it's just total clear seeing. There you are. And when I'm there, I will let you know whether I was right or wrong.
you
So
know
I think if when you're in that space, then I think you can answer the question. But there's a lot of people who think they are enlightened and they've just had an experience or whatever, and they've now got a whole identity with it. So this was actually something that I was looking more into, which is where the self-worth question came in. But that's for later if you like.
Yes, please. Yes. And so this is a good point. Now there's kind of two extremes on this enlightenment thing, and I was going to say the exact same thing when you said when I'm certain, then I can get back to you. But right now I can only speculate from where I am, right? But I do see these kind of extremes on this. And Wendy, I don't want to say she did an extreme here, but there's this notion that, oh, it's beyond me, it's impossible. It's kind of almost a joke because so many of us are so far behind. But I will say that I have witnessed certain practitioners that seem to, even though I can't really define enlightenment, I would say they're a lot closer perhaps than a vast majority of people, not to compare anything. But on the other hand, like when on the other hand, it's uh, so yeah. So we got one extreme saying it's not possible, but the other hand is some people go and say, oh, they claim enlightenment right away. So actually, it does help to have a definition for this, but I don't know what it is. And in a way, to nail it down too, I think doesn't do it a total service anyway. Maybe one way to approach this is kind of the relative and the absolute. In the Buddhist tradition, one would say it's an attainment of nibbana, or realizing, not necessarily an attainment, but realizing nibbana, or realizing the unconditioned, the unailing, the deathless. So there's all these synonyms for it, and you can't really say what it is directly. You can kind of point towards it, and we have these things, notions of sudden enlightenment and gradual cultivation. One of the things they say is, enlightenment's an accident, and meditation helps you become accident prone. um, of course, the word light is in there. So, but then I've heard other people who have been dubbed arhats, awakened, fully awakened, that that it's beyond this notion of inner light. It's not. It's beyond this. People talk about non-duality. So there's so many things to say about it, but at the end of the day, I'm not there yet. So I mean, I can, this could be multiple shows in and of itself, but at the end of the day, Wendy and I aren't an authority on this. So I would encourage people to seek out those who are closer to that than we are, if I may speak for Wendy too.
Yeah, I think that's right. So Devesa says easy to claim when we don't fully understand it. And I think there's some truth to that.
Oh yeah, and clear seeing, I like that, and understanding. It's almost like a realization, though. It's not a cognitive thing, although cognition can be involved with. And then there's supposedly people who have reached it, but they can't explain it. They can't teach. They can't say anything because it doesn't do its service. They're just like, if you hear these stories of people that are just like everyday people, but they can't really teach about it. So yeah, and then there's these notions of liberation. Is that different than enlightenment? Awakening, is that different than liberation and enlightenment? So these are kind of complex questions. Maybe they're splitting hairs, maybe there's significant differences, but yeah, maybe we can get her definition of it if you'd like, if you know what it is. Yeah, what was her name? Devendra?
Devesa, Deve,
Devesa.
Devesa.
That's a cool name.
So whether it's a man
Mhm.
or woman, we don't know.
Good
Um,
point.
yeah. So and Ms. Reed seemed happy with the definition that we gave.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I think yeah. So what were our topics again today? I think we
Yeah,
so
exactly. So let's get back to the playbook.
let's
No,
get
this is
back to
this just so you know, this is a meditation Q&A. So this is encouraged to just spontaneously ask questions. That's great. We'll field them if we can. The only reason I have a topic ahead of time is because we don't usually get as many questions as I'd like. So please, yeah, please keep in with the questions. So I think the next topic we can go on to is this self-worth, and this is what you wrote about to me too, right? Self-worth and belonging, and I think, go ahead. Yeah.
yeah. So Devesa is a man, just so you
Hmm.
know. Um, so what I so actually I think it ties into this question, Devesa's question
Mm.
about what is enlightenment. So one of the things that I've been looking at is self-worth in and it's about this sense of when you feel when you have been excluded from the group. You absolutely know.
Yes, this is
And yeah, and it feels awful. There's this deep sorrow, and you go, well, I'm going to go and find somebody else to play, take my bat and ball and go and find somebody else, or go and play over here, or I'm going to do my own thing. And it's extremely painful. And there is a desire to, you can't go towards that group. We're done with that. And it's just such an awful feeling. And it really corrodes the sense of self worth, I feel. It absolutely eats away at our sense of being because we have this understanding about if we are if we are excluded, we are not we have nothing. What I have to offer is not valued, it's not wanted. And so I think it sits there. But my sense is if we can allow that sorrow to be experienced and to feel into that being excluded and how awful it is. So this is not a light-hearted practice. This is only if you have a really strong sense of love in your life, because if you don't have a lot of love and space coming from other people, you're in a really supportive environment, I think you could probably go mad. So my sense is that you feel, if there's a way that to feel this sorrow and then allow it to be, so that it no longer is something that you fear and you try and distance yourself from, because it's that distancing yourself from it that sort of brings the identity, the self and other into process. By allowing yourself to feel it, which is extremely painful, then there's nothing to fear, and then whether you're included or excluded, it actually doesn't make any difference because you don't have that fear. So that's where I am. That's what that meant. I hope I answered that question that
yeah
I
it,
that text. Yeah.
it's brilliant, and this notion that we're just not conditioned to turn towards something, face it directly and feel it and just be with it. And because a lot of times it is unpleasant and painful even, however, the only way through it, or the only way, yeah, past it, is through it. You have to go into it and through it. In my experience as well. Now, if it's so overwhelming, we don't have to do it all at once, right? And another thing that came up with this is also conducive to authenticity, because if we don't want to face it and be with it and go through this unpleasant feeling of being excluded, then I'm going to set it aside, and then I'm going to pretend and take on fake things that aren't that don't resonate with me, that aren't aligned with me, and come up with something inauthentic in order to fake my way into belonging. But it's not based on anything. It's a house of cards. And I get it. It's just a human drive to want to fit in and belong. I think we have these deep fears of being excluded from groups, and then we will die because we won't be supported or have what we need to get by. But that's just not the case. I feel we're always going to get exactly what we need, exactly when we need it. And even if we look at where we do belong, where we feel a sense of belonging. We're not always going to feel that way. We're going to have these senses of, something happens. I might have said something. Someone else might have said something. I might not want to do something, or might have a different opinion. Something might happen, and then I don't feel as a degree of belonging, like a spectrum, than I did at other times. So we'll see how this kind of ebbs and flows. And sometimes I feel like more I belong, sometimes I don't, So I think it's almost impossible to not feel belonging, but also to always feel belonging. So I think this spectrum is going to come up. But another thing that really helps is just being authentic. And the more I can be real and just be natural, and whatever that may mean, or just experiment with what that's like, then we're going to kind of attract people that we align with, or that we resonate with, and or will be drawn towards those people. And some of us do better in bigger groups, and some of us do better in smaller groups. Some of us do good with just a friend or two, and they feel belonging maybe in nature, or we feel belonging with guys. A lot of times it's with activities, things we have in common, things we share. And maybe the feminine bonds more on, more emotional relationships, right? More kind of heart to heart, intimate relationships. Or I'm not exactly sure, but guys, it's fairly, juvenile, sometimes almost juvenile and surface level. It's just like, oh, you like what I like, okay, let's hang out, and this, we're cool. So it's not. I mean, it's uncomplicated, but it's also kind of surface level a lot of times. But it is a important human thing, and I hear this more in meditation circles more and more. But this sense of belonging.
Yeah, I think for guys, some guys are very sensitive and very articulate. And I was just talking with a friend of mine on Sunday, and she said, "My boy, he's about 12. She's Chinese, got a Chinese background. Her English is very good, but his is already surpassed hers. He's 12. He's highly intelligent. He's very articulate." And she goes, "I don't actually understand the words he uses anymore." So I think often guys have maybe not quite such strong language skills as girls, and it sits there.
Yes.
Now, before I go on, I just want to say two things.
Hmm.
Daveza says you need chaos to balance peace, and vice versa. And Ms. Reed says Wendy Josh, and I don't know what that means. We've got a thumbs up
Yes.
there. I don't know what that's for.
I would just guess that she's referring to what we just said about
Okay.
belonging. Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Um, yeah, and this is another good point about introvert and extroverted styles too. And I would agree with Wendy that on a whole, that females, or the feminine, has a greater capacity and what's a fancy word here? Proclivity towards language. And see, my vocabulary in that comes out when I'm around people that have a higher capacity and, wieldiness for language. But when I'm just hanging out, all that just kind of goes away. I kind of was a book nerd and a language nerd in the past, word nerd. So that's why I have a little bit of skills, but my foreign language skills, not so much. So yeah, on the whole, though, I think the females' working vocabulary in general, all the time, is just higher than guys, and it just makes sense. It's no really good or bad. It's just a difference, and yeah. So introvert, extrovert. Introverts seem to have need time alone to recharge. So belonging with introverts, I think, might be a little bit different than extroverts. Extroverts kind of thrive on being around people and just talking and being in social situations, right? And then there's an ambivert or mesiovert that's kind of in the middle. I would say maybe when I was more introverted, I kind of really get into nerd things, like really specific things, and then you could connect on these activities that are kind of more internal. So spending more time, a sense of belonging, maybe more in the mind, and what activity I'm doing, and the things connected to that. And then when I get around people that also share the same enthusiasm, while extroverts are just like to be maybe seen and heard more, or just interact, meet just people in general. I don't know if I'm getting any of this right, but I'm wondering if there's any significant. But at the end of the day, it's a feeling, right? This sense of belonging is a feeling. Um, yeah, either we feel it or we don't. We feel excluded. We feel like we belong or we don't. Usually, it's more noticeable when we don't feel we belong somewhere.
Yeah, I just
Mm.
want to address a couple of things.
Sure.
So, I go on to introverts and extroverts because I have a different kind of way of looking
Mm.
at it. But I'm just conscious that Devesa has talked
Yeah.
about balancing peace and vice versa.
Yeah.
I heard it was about um, what's the definition of peace, and this was by a UN conflict zone kind of person. What's the difference? What does sort of Anglo, UN, and UK and Australian American kind of ideas of peace, and that is not having conflict or not having different, not arguing, it's quiet. But in he said in the rest of the world, peace is where that everybody lives with dignity, which is a deeper perspective. So I thought that was a more useful definition because it's not about the absence, but it's saying, well, this is what we have. Everybody lives with dignity. And until you have that, you actually never have peace because I guess it fits in with that thing about self worth. So going into introversion and extroversion, I think of it differently. I've heard your definitions before, but I'm a very extroverted person. But I am not interested in parties or socializing. I have to go to networking events because I have a community group. I try and avoid parties and I'm really dislike all that sort of stuff. I find it all too much. But I would say an extrovert is the person who makes the first bid for contact. So go up to somebody, hi, how you going? Now somebody can learn to do that. As an introvert, you can learn to do that, and that's Barack Obama. That's apparently what he does. But and so what they've found with the introvert and extrovert is that somebody who is introverted is somebody who will wait for the other to come towards them. And thinking about that, people, and I don't wait. I always go, "Hi, how you going?"
Usually,
And
I
so,
do that too.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I think you're
Sure.
actually very extroverted.
Now I am. Yeah, I used to not be like that. This. Yeah. Yeah.
So what they've found is that when you get introverts and you say behave more extroverted, they go, "Well, it's a bit of a push. It's not my natural position, but I can do it." It's okay, I can do it. But when you do extroverts and you say, okay, now you socially withdraw, you become more introverted, it kind of crushes their soul and it erodes their self esteem. And I think it's to do with this whole idea of feeling excluded, not feeling able to contribute. What I have to offer isn't valued. So I think that's a bit more there. That's what I think.
Yeah, that's really even better put, way better put, I think, actually. And this is why a silent meditation retreat is great for more extroverted people, because then that's the rule. Nobody's going to get to go up and do any kind of initiating, contact and speaking. So, however, there's still that sense of belonging are part of the group, but communication will then be in a different style other than verbal. Won't stop the body language. It won't stop the energetic interactions that people have around each other. And actually, in my experience, a lot of times those become more amplified because I'm still wanting to communicate, but I can't do it through language. So these other more subtle realms that I don't normally pay attention to, because language can be so powerful on overriding these things, that now I'll be able to tune in more to body language and energy and emotions, perhaps. So now, going back to what you said about, uh, I think both of those definitions of peace are good, you know. And so, what is the opposite of peace? And some might say war. And it's interesting. The commenter is linking it to chaos. So, see, I don't know about that, because chaos, I think, is also the opposite of that would be kind of order. You know, so are we linking? Should we be linking peace and order together? Sometimes yes, I'd say. Sometimes maybe not. And chaos and war or violence. And I think sometimes they do link together, but not all the time. We can have internal chaos and still be completely peaceful. There can be war and there can be in violence, and it can be very orderly. We look at some things in the past, and it's frightening. So I think it's helpful to kind of suss these things out and see when they might be linked together, when they might be opposites, when they might be uh, polarity and in opposition to each other, and when they just don't connect at all. And of course, some people start chaos, some people start violence, some people work towards peace, and some people work towards order and harmony. So yeah, I just wanted to point that out. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think I'm not sure I entirely agree with
Mm,
your uh, definition that the opposite. I Because I look at
mm,
Devase's comment as actually very insightful. Because I go, when you have peace, it's actually a dynamic space and kind of has a little bit of elasticity, and it's not chaotic, but it feels within a bound of movement. Whereas chaos is where it's sort of you're trying to maybe crunch things down to be so ordered that there's this external things that are unable to be controlled, and that's what creates the chaos. So Devesa has said that's what I meant. Introspectively, it kind of falls apart collectively compared to individually. Now let me read that again because I just need to understand that.
mm,
He's cleverer than me. All right.
mm.
Introspectively, it kind of falls apart collectively compared to individually. Perhaps you can answer that one.
I would just ask to elaborate on that too, because now we're throwing all these complicated ideas into introspection, extrospection, and collectivity and individuality. So yeah, these are multiple layers on layers, and I'm trying to yeah. To parse some things out here. So yeah, these are all different layers and levels we can look at things like this on. So yes, and Wendy's idea though of let me just remove the comment here of this notion of chaos. I think this is something interesting to explore, because I never really looked at it like that. When you're trying to have order and it actually creates chaos, So in a way, these are. I don't know if we'd say they're polarity or opposition, but I think we all know what chaos is in our lives, right? Now, how it comes about, I'm not so certain. But when it's there, it's in contrast to, I guess, order or lack of chaos, right? And chaos can, at least in my experience, it seems like it can be more conducive towards conflict and other than peace. I don't think it always has to be, but I know it seems like some people thrive on chaos and some people become almost debilitated by chaos. Sometimes chaos can stir things up, and then allow others to come in and then impose more order, or like Wendy's saying, maybe there's a little bit too much order, and then the opposition to that, or the polarity to that, is just kind of expected that it will, have the other effect. So
I,
yeah.
I was just thinking about there's a guy, maybe older than me, probably in his 70s, I think, and he's been around forever and a day. And he's quite well known in Australia. His name's Dick Smith, and he had some electronic stores when we were younger that got sold out, but. he would sit down and he would have the television on, the radio on, he would have a book open, and he would be incredibly productive. And I would just, that to me would be chaos. I would need to make all of that silent and make it go away. But for him, that was peace. So it's an interesting kind of idea.
It
Yeah.
really is, and I would really like to talk to him and see what that is about, because now there's some. I'm the same way as Wendy. Usually, there's some exceptions though. There's a thing where I can just say, okay, well, I can only focus on one thing at a time. However, the background, they call it like the unconscious mind, supposedly some say will remember everything. We might not always have access to it. So if we're trying to take in a lot of stuff in the background unconsciously, maybe, but that in a way it's kind of pointless. Another one that people do is they turn on a sporting event, right? We used to do this when I was a kid. We'd turn on the baseball game on the TV, but we turn the volume down and we'd listen to the announcer on the radio, because the announcer on the radio has to work way harder because he's talking to people without that available image, where the people on TV, they're not vocally as adept as those doing it on the radio. So yeah, but anyway, yeah.
So Ms. Reed has said, so is chaos a problem? Create problem to find solution. Gosh, that sounds like my local counsellor, to be honest. He's like always creating dramas in order to be the one to come in and rescue the situation. I'm sure we know other people around who are like that. So is chaos a problem? Create the problem to find a solution. But is the way
It's
it's put here, chaos to balance, is interesting, but when you know the context of it, then you can go from there. So did you get that? By the way,
Yes.
yeah, did you
Go ahead.
understand? Yep.
Well, so is chaos a problem? Well, that depends. Does it always have to be, or can it be okay? Because we're going to face chaos no matter what. So what do we do with it, right? Do we flip out and add more chaos, or do we have a solution, or what are our strategies for dealing with it? Create a problem to find a solution. So this is a classic thing. It's called problem reaction solution. So some people say that there's a problem in the world, right? But they claim that actually that's not an organic problem. It's not a natural problem. It's actually been orchestrated and engineered by those who want to cause that problem. And what they need is a reaction from the public. Oh my gosh, can you believe so and so? I can't believe this. Something should be done about it. We have to do something about this. And then the people that create the problem said, "Oh yeah, a matter of fact, we have the solution waiting in the wings. All we needed was the reaction to it." So they'll artificially create a problem, wait for the reaction, and then they have a prescribed solution already waiting that they had planned while they're creating the problem itself. So this is called problem reaction solution. I don't know if it's the Hegelian dialectic or not, but that might be something different. So I don't know if that's what she's referring to, but okay. And then the next thing is, but the way it's put here, chaos to balance, is interesting. But when you know the context of it, then you can go from there. So that's right. So there's many flavors of chaos, right? So what's surrounding the chaos? Where does it come from? What kind of effect is it having? What all is involved in the chaos? And then how are people viewing it and responding to it? And what are people doing about it? And what kind of effective how effective are they in their view and response to the said chaos? uh, yeah. So these are some things around this.
So Devesa says sometimes it's a necessary evil. I'm trying to think back to what that was. That was I think about the chaos.
Mm.
I'm assuming. And then Ms. Reed has said, no, chaos is not a problem. It's a cop out for drama to thrive. Not a fan at all. Well, I'm with you on that
Yeah,
one.
yeah. And I think a necessary evil, this phrase, I don't know where it came from. I'd like to look up the origins of this, because is evil ever necessary? First, you have to define what evil is, but I think this is a retrospective excuse for things that aren't skillful in the world, right? So, in a lack of creativity. So, you know, how much are we just jumping to the conclusion that, oh, it's a necessary evil? And how many wars have been justified saying, oh, it's a necessary evil? Yes, war is bad, but we need it in order to fight greater evil. So I'm not really on board with that. So I would have to say we have to go by more of a case by case basis in a specific thing, because a lot of time it just has to do with a lack of understanding, a lack of creativity for dealing with things. And not that it's wrong. I mean, we're all doing the best we can. If we could do better, we would. But I don't think very rarely do I think there's ever a necessary evil. Um,
So it
yes.
says here,
And
so I'm on
sure.
Wikipedia at this point.
Okay.
A necessary evil is an evil that someone believes must be done or accepted because it is necessary to achieve a better outcome,
Mm,
especially because plausible alternative courses of action or inaction are expected to be worse. It is the lesser of two evils, basically,
yeah. Yeah.
which maintains that given two bad choices, the one that is the least bad is the better choice.
And I heard this about how the Chinese view American politics, and I actually think it has a lot of wisdom in it. It's not the lesser of two evils; they're both poisons. so,
Okay.
so you know, pick your poison. It's both are going to poison you. So why not just sit down the poisons and walk away from them? So I think that's it. Sure.
Yeah, so the history of it is the Oxford Dictionary of Word Origins asserts that the idea of a necessary evil goes back to Greek, describing the first necessary evil as marriage. There you go. And further stating that there's a good dose of
I don't know if
misogyny
I'm
in
going to
here.
touch that one.
Describing the first necessary evil as marriage, and further stating that the first example in English from 1547 refers to a woman. Thomas Fuller, in his 1642 work, The Holy State and the Profane State, made another of the earliest recorded uses of the phrase when he described the court jester, as something that some count as a necessary evil in court. So
Hmm.
that there you go.
It's interesting. These English, the word English on a pool ball means to spin it, right? To put a spin on something.
Okay, yeah, well, yeah. So Ms. Reed has said
Mhm.
diversity allows for growth, each being authentic. Evil does not need to be here to grow. People talk about the devil's advocate, that
Mm.
phrase, and I go,
Yeah.
well, does the devil need any advocacy? I'm thinking no.
That's another interesting term, isn't it? Yes, it's these kind of dark forces in the world. There's these claims that, oh, we're just taking this role for your own good because people are too asleep. They can't. They'll never wake up without us. They would just be in la la land. But if we do something extreme, then they're going to take notice and have motivation in order to change. And I don't buy that BS. And that's there might be a little something to it, but like Ms. Reed points out, evil does not need to be here for us to grow. Yes, I get it. We have, as I think of as a collective, we have a really long ways to go, but that excuse I don't think is good enough for justifying. And this is another huge thing in spirituality. I tend to not use the words good and evil so much. I mean, yes, there is good and evil. I think on a relative scale, what leads towards harm, what leads away from harm. I think that would be a guiding point. But what's more resonant, I think, with more people, because some people might interpret one thing as good as evil, and vice versa, yada yada. But this notion of skillfulness, if we look at a skilled craftsman or artisan, everybody can see, oh, that's a skill. That person has skill. Look at what they've done. I can see them working. It's very skillful. So we can apply that to our behavior and society and just about everything in our lives. Is it skillful or is it unskillful? And then is it wise? Is it unwise? Is it foolish or is it not foolish? And then we can get into things like wholesomeness. What makes the heart whole? This notion of wholeness and wholesomeness or unwholesomeness. I think these are things to keep in mind when we it's because good and evil, they're very loaded terms a lot of times, you know. I don't want to
Yeah.
necessarily shy away from them, but I also want to bring into this notion of skillfulness as well.
And it's a thing. So I just want to put in a couple more comments.
Hmm.
So back then, did they arrange them? Asks Miss Reed. I think that's in terms of Greek marriages, and I think probably the answer is yes. Um, then, because it was all just marriages were about a formal, financial arrangement. So yeah, when you tied the knot, that's how it was in those days. So then Daveza says, "Do you think psilocybin therapy has merit?" I think we've discussed this
We have, yes. I
previously,
was going to say that.
and for me, the jury's still out. My concern is always that I think that what can happen with psilocybin is that you end up. What I've seen with people, and it's just anecdotally, is that people who the one I'm thinking of, and we shouldn't really say it from one case study, but this is the only one I know from my friends. A friend, so I know the husband, and the wife, her wife, his wife, says um, a friend of hers, an acquaintance, she had a lot of trauma background. She has an autistic son, an adult autistic son. She has had a job. All this. She got into psilocybin therapy. She said it was amazing. It worked so well. It was fantastic. I loved it. And now she's lost all her friends because all she can talk about is psilocybin therapy. Her adult
Kool-Aid,
son,
drank the Kool-Aid.
yeah, but
Yeah.
I think it disturbs the mind. So her adult son, who is autistic, no longer has contact with her. She's lost her job. So it's, do I think it has merit? I don't know yet. I know that in Australia it's allowed under strict supervision, but I haven't seen yet, I haven't met anybody where that's been a change. And my sense is, I wonder if it interferes with the egoic structure, so that the egoic structure in sort of takes over and then becomes this invaded thing. I don't know, but I just I I feel that we still need a lot more research on it. Yeah.
And I can't speak for everyone else, of course. I can give my personal view and opinions on this, but I don't know necessarily mean it should apply to everyone. I think where it might have merit, they talk about, is towards the end of life. So it could simulate, if someone's absolutely terrified of death and they're getting ready to die, I don't know, but that's still not an advocation there, and I'm not advocating it necessarily. Um, and there's so many different psychedelics, and psychiatry now wants to get in on psychedelics, right? They want to be able to prescribe these. In the states, they're prescribing ketamine, and in psychiatry. I don't know about psilocybin. I mean, I think they're even doing like DMT. I know they. What was the guy who did the spirit molecule? So there's a movie about that, and so yeah, it's all the kind of hot topic and rage now. And I just the easy way to go around this is do meditation. There is you can reach. There's certain types of meditation. I don't know if I recommend these either, but you can reach all kinds of different states. And in fact, on the Noble Eightfold Path, you're supposed to eradicate states that are not helpful, prevent them from re-arising, and then you're supposed to maintain helpful states and then generate new states that are helpful towards the path. Now, I don't know if any of these types of states are involved in those, but I know intoxication. So I think this is what it points to. Are you intoxicated by this or not? Intoxication is not helpful because it will lead us to do things we normally wouldn't do, that will not be in our long-term, even short-term, sometimes best interest, nor of those around us. So we have to look, is it intoxicating or not? Does this cause intoxication? And just as a general rule, usually intoxication is not helpful.
Yeah.
I found in my experience. So that's one thing we want to look at. If you are going to do them and not disregard everything else and just hell bent, dead set on doing this, please, please, please do lots and lots of research, and you vet trained practitioners and facilitators, and go and talk to them and make sure you're comfortable. Do it, see what the preparation is, and then the integration afterwards, because a lot of times people take these and they don't know how to integrate the experiences into their daily life. So it's absolutely vital. And like I say, I really just can't recommend these things just right off the
So
bat. Yeah.
we've got some more comment from that.
Hmm.
So Devesa says, I found it helpful. It makes sense. Some people may get consumed by the experience though. And so I guess I want to ask Devesa a little bit more
Hmm.
info. We've got 5 minutes to wrap up, probably
Hmm.
four by the time we get through this, so it'll be a bit more.
Hmm.
But if you can just say, have has your did you keep your friends? Did you keep your job? Did you find that all the sort of capacity to live more in the world has benefited, or have you found that things have dropped off, people have dropped off, you've perhaps a little bit more ranty and ravey? So I'd really like to know that from Devesa. We're off topic completely here,
Yeah, it's
but
okay. And then
but I'm
how
curious.
exactly how was it helpful, Devesa? Yes.
Yeah, that's a great one. So Miss
Hmm.
Reed says, unless you know the entire role of it completely, then yes. So know what you're getting into before you do it. And I did hear somebody um, I think some research, which is again, how do you integrate what you've had? So she had had this amazing experience. It had worked really well for her. And then what happened is that I think she went to see her psychologist, and her psychologist said something fairly neutral, and it just what resonated. It landed really wrong, and it was completely like it messed her up for 2 years. So that was so the psychedelic experience was fine, but the integration
Yeah.
afterwards was
Yeah.
the problem. So I thought that was a very interesting thing. So it's not that I'm against it. I want to know more because I want to find out whether it's hype. I want to find out where who it's good for, who it's not good for, whatever. Um, Before I would recommend any of that. And as you say, people who are at end of life, they're terminally ill. I've read that they're more accepting of doing in that circumstance because basically they're going to die imminently anyway. So I think the reintegration of it doesn't seem to be such a big, big, big issue, I guess. That's that.
Exactly, and it's just good advice. I think this comes from the Buddha too. When you're doing it, before you do an action, reflect. Is this going to be blameless? Is it going to help or hurt me and others? And then reflect on that while you're doing it, and then afterwards too. So it's just general good advice for doing these things. Yeah, the integration period for this is absolutely key, I would think too. Um,
So
we didn't.
Devesa, we've only got a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
So Devesa said, "I found life to be easier actually." Thank you, Devesa, for responding. The friends I have been supportive. In fact, I've actually found a passion for cymatic patterns, whatever that is,
Mm,
and complex physics after I started experimenting with it. So the question is, so I get that you've got these new interests,
mhm,
but have you kind of dropped out? I
mm,
guess and are you sort of removing yourself further and further away from mainstream life? And
mm,
that's always my question.
mm.
So I perhaps because I think we
Yeah.
need to be more connected with life and people. So that's the only
And
thing.
and uh, the Vesa says, and no, I'm not overly vocal about it. And for just real quick, cymatics is this thing of you play a sound and you run it through substances, and it will make certain patterns based on the frequency of the sound. So it's a kind of an artistic, scientific thing. And I would just add to Wendy's thing, the way I view it is, we don't necessarily need. I mean, I don't feel I need necessarily be more mainstream. However, I don't need to completely withdraw all the time. I still need to be able to interact interact with the world and move in mainstream society when I need to. However, it doesn't have a huge appeal for me, but I don't want to be completely seen as a shunned outcast, raving lunatic when I go into town to buy bread or something. Right? I still have to be able to play that game when I need to, but then be around those who are going to be more a benefit for me and for those of others. And Wendy, we didn't even get into self worth here as much. I think we mentioned a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah. Devesa says, "No, I have not.
Mm,
Still find it important to be grounded." And I think that's
mm,
what I'm sort of
okay.
curious to know is whether people stay grounded,
Mm,
because I think you can kind of, I know, I sort of think, I mean, I have never taken anything, so I've been,
mm,
I'm taking a very cautious approach because I just don't want to go loopy. I have a tendency for a lot of excitability in my life. And so I don't want to go have this experience and it tip me over the edge. So maybe it's better for people who are perhaps more cautious and
mm,
withdrawn, a bit like somebody like Devesa, who tends to be perhaps more calm in their disposition.
exactly.
But Ms. Reed says, yes, very interesting, but know the entirety of the substance. And I think there's
Yeah.
really,
It's
yeah,
It's a really good point because with meditation, you can just stop it like that. You can get up and it quits. If you're on some kind of psychedelic, you can't do that. If it starts going wrong, you can't just say, okay, I'm done with this. No, too bad. It could be hours and hours, and those hours and hours could seem like, months and months and months. And so, yeah, you really don't know. There's really not very many ways to prepare for it. So, like when he says it depends on your disposition, like Ms. Reed says, you know, do we know the outcome of what it's going to be? Same way with our actions or anything in life. It's just like the precepts in Buddhism. Yes, I could break those when I need to, but I better be sure that I know the consequences of my actions. And since I don't, I can't see the consequences of my actions. It's easier and more skillful just to follow, these precepts or guidelines. Or if you have rules, laws and principles in your life that you live by, it's easier just to adhere to those that work, unless you know for sure if you go against one of those, what the outcome's going to be. And you have to be fairly enlightened, maybe to tie back towards the beginning of this, of what those consequences might be. Yeah.
So, we're going to wrap
Mhm.
it up here, I
Sure.
think. But Ms. Reed says meditation is a much healthier approach, and I definitely feel like that because it's so you can go more slowly,
Sure.
like pushing the brain beyond a space. And then Devesa has invited Ms. Reed to ask, what about both at the same time? So.
In a sensory deprivation tank, right? With binaural beats. No.
I think I have seen there is a video on that. Somebody in Switzerland did that. So, Devesa, I encourage you to check out that video. I don't know how you're going to find it, but there was some research done in a meditation retreat in Switzerland, and they did a proper scientific study. So, I encourage
If
you to
you
look at
you
that.
can if you Wendy, if you want to send me that, I can put it in the show notes. Otherwise, yeah, they can just be found on folks' own. Well,
Yeah.
we're a little over time here. This has been great. I appreciate all the audience participation, and yeah, and I'll be back probably sometime in December or January at the latest. I think that's
So
their plan. Yeah.
a while away. And thank you, Ms. Reed. You're in the game of the drug, and that can be an entanglement and can do damage. And that's always my question. So
Oh yeah.
there we are. All right, we're going to close it out because we are over time. Thanks
Yes,
so
we
much,
are.
guys, and love the participation.
Yes,
And be well. And we'll catch up again in December or January, whenever it is.
that's right.
We'll keep
Until
you
then,
posted.
y'all be well. Bye
Yep.
now.